I want to understand really what I consider to be one of the most important things with candidates is an onboarding process. And I really see a lack of it uh, in the construction industry. Typically, it's really just kind of like what you mentioned your dad does for the skills assessment, where it's just throw them on the job site and see what happens type thing, or have them follow around Rick and see if they can learn from Rick over for a week and then put them on their own, right? So what do you talk about with onboarding process? What's important to you and your team and the clients that you work for?
Thinking back to what we put in the course, because we've got a more robust version of it because we've tweaked it over the years, internally in our companies. But I mean, the main thing. So I'm a simple guy, right? Don't have a business degree. Started laying brick when I was 9. So everything to me comes down to like, what are we after? So what is onboarding? I'm trying to set them up for success. So I know it's like the first impression of any restaurant or anywhere you go. I know the first few days matter the most. So we look at the first 2 weeks, and then I look at the first 2 days specifically. And there's a checklist that we have. So it's like, do you have your logins? Who do you go to for what certain problems you have? Communication. Um, we do a buddy system, right? So they have one person they can go to at all times, unless it falls under certain categories, then they escalate it. Um, like what is the goal of the onboarding? But so I think it's having a checklist with the main goal of setting them up for success and saying, okay, for the first, day, 2 days, and 2 weeks, what's everything they need, um, and making sure that they have that, and establishing your company, your culture, introductions. There's a lot to that. So this is a time consuming one, but when you do it once and do it right, you can rinse and repeat. Um, so I think that's really important. But I think what I found that might be a little bit more important for busy companies is having a process for when your onboarding isn't perfect. And that process is, if you establish a check-in. So like if you come work at our construction company, we have a check-in at the 2 week point, 30 days, 90 days, and 120 days. And so we create an environment where you already know on the 14th day, you're going to sit down with your direct report. You're going to check in, how's things going? This is working, this is not. And so when you establish an open line of communication, it doesn't feel like this big, heavy thing where it's like, oh my gosh, I've been here for 2 weeks and they're pulling me in the office. They got to tell me something. What did I do? Am I going to make it? So I think having the communication in place and having a plan for if things don't go perfectly is just as important as having a really good plan, because it's a catch-all, right? At 14
Yeah.
days, if something's not perfect, they'll bring it up, they'll communicate. You can work through things if they're the right person. So I think it's a two-sided coin.
Yeah, definitely. I always think with onboarding, you dedicate we've already the things that we've talked about for from start to finish of getting a clear understanding, getting the job descriptions, knowing your org chart, doing the interviews, having a speed to lead, all this stuff takes a lot of time and diligence. And I see too many people say that it didn't work out with this candidate when they didn't put any time into the onboarding process of thinking about what the experience is going to be like on day one, what they're going to know about our company and our customers, how are they going to meet the team, what are those interactions going to be like. If they have a question, can they only go to the direct report, or who are the other people in the team they can ask questions to when the direct report's busy with whatever he's got going on? So I think that onboarding process is so critical, and you should invest a lot of time and energy in your hiring funnel per se and how that works from start to finish. But do it just as much if you can, if not more, on the onboarding process. Because if you find the right person, but you don't give them the attention and time and resources that they need to be able to succeed, then you've really just spent all this time for nothing because they're gone. So, anyways, that's my 2 cents. I love it. Um, what are we missing, man? What else is a part of this process that we should know, Matt?
Oh man, we've covered.
63
I think,
modules, and we've covered
yeah,
8. Retention, I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
retention, maybe is something we can stick
Yeah.
on the end here before we get really into. I'm really interested in seeing and hearing about your 63 module course, but retention, one of the biggest things, it's like keeping a customer is a lot better than trying to acquire new ones
Yeah.
all the time.
So we found that if and these, like the onboarding and the retention are huge. My retention is my favorite. They're very bespoke, right? And so every company we've seen onboarding that's completely different and successful, right? We've seen some
Yeah.
companies where they come running in and they're like celebrities and they're like clapping and oh my god, they're screaming, right? And we've seen other companies where it's like you show up, they're like, look, what kind of coffee you like? They have it for you. It's more intimate. So I want to go back to that for 1 second and just say, like, it's okay to find the processes that work for your company. And we do this for companies, US, Canada. We're about to go into the UK market and Australia market. So like we've seen different onboarding plans, and there's a wide range of things that work as long as you put the time and attention and the fundamentals, like for sure, super important. Same thing with culture, right? And how we retain people. It needs to be unique to your company, but the principles of culture, if you ask yourself, so a couple of things we do that are like principle based that anybody can do. One is what's called an honest employee audit. So we've created a framework of questions on a 1 to 10 scale that gives us a pulse check of how everybody in the company is feeling. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how valued do I feel for my hard work? You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how heard is the input that I, instill in my company? I don't remember them all offhand, but this is really important because as you have more layers in your company, your managers are like, yeah, everyone in the field is happy. They love it. Everyone's good. Right. And then Tom quits and you're like, what happened? It's like, oh, well, Tom had a bad day and, Tom's family life's getting in the way. And right. When we do these honest employee audits, we recommend you do them quarterly at least. What you'll find is like we did one early on this year. I mean, February now, but like in early January, business owner was certain everyone was happy. He got an average of 3 out of 10 for happiness around pay. I'm like, that's the data. I mean, they clicked the button. You had 28 employees and 30% satisfaction. So having a way in which you can see the problems is huge, right? For culture. Because it's like, how do I maintain it, create it, or fix it? Got to know what the problems are. So that's one. Assuming I have that, the other question I'd ask myself is, what is our culture? So we want to clearly define it. And the big thing I would look at is how are you creating fun and connection? Like, what does that look like? So, for example, like if you look at us as humans, right? It's like, well, we need water, we need food, we need shelter. Like those things, you're not usually having fun if you don't have those three things. Fun is like the bonus. So if you look at it with a company, it's the same concept. It's like when the work isn't super stressful, when you have enough people, fun is like the last thing you get to. It's like, we'll have fun when everything else is done. I like to flip it and say, where can I make things more fun and more exciting? Because I think when you consider somebody's willing to spend their career there, how do you create fun? How do you create engagement? How are you making people feel rewarded? So are you celebrating birthdays? Do you do company events where everyone gets together? We have some companies that'll do a spin wheel with basic prizes, and they'll give away like a company branded poker chip for like things that they like to see done. And once a month they get together, they redeem their spins, you can win really cool stuff. Like it's, how are you making people feel special? How are you creating and fostering that teamwork? And then the best companies, you'll find fun. They do Halloween things. And a lot of the smaller companies, like when we were much smaller, fun was the last thing on my mind.
Yeah. I think retention is a whole nother topic that deserves so much time, because if you are not retaining employees, let's say the average lifetime at your company is 2 years, essentially every 2 years you have a new company and you're going to be stuck in the same problems. And if you're always having the same problems, you're not growing. You're going to have problems, but they need to be progressing onto the next problem, not we're always dealing with the same crap. So retention is worth so much. I mean, everything that we just talked about for hiring, if you retain an employee, you don't have to go through that for one more person, So every time you retain it, you don't have to go through that process. Obviously you're going to grow and you're going to have to go through the hiring process regardless, but you don't want to work backwards.